Welcome to Karmic Patterns Vedic Astrology Podcast. Today is March 2nd, and this is my 10th podcast. To start out with, I'd love to just thank all of my listeners, let you know that I really appreciate all of your feedback and input and comments, as well as likes on the podcast videos that I've been placing up on YouTube. I appreciate your support so much. For those of you who have been listening for the last few podcasts, you have probably noticed I've started to bring on some guests occasionally. Most recently, I had Dr. Kavita Chennaiyan on with the Venus in Pisces forecast, which, by the way, if you haven't listened to yet, Venus is moving into Pisces eminently, and this is a really special transit. It only happens once every 12 years due to an exchange that's occurring with Jupiter and Libra. So definitely check that out on my YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. But the podcast is evolving. Like I said, I'm having special guests on the podcast, and this is happening because I've always been so interested in remedial measures or ways for us to help manage our lives and our karmas as seen through the birth chart. So whether it's very traditional means, which is through mantra and yantra, or less traditional means, which would be practical remedies, or just Ayurveda, anything that can help us get through both the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional experiences that we all have based upon our charts and then the transits of the planets. So I hope that you're enjoying the special guests that I have been bringing onto the show. I would love to hear more feedback on that. And especially, otherwise you're just going to listen to me, what I call astrobabble for the entire time. And hopefully it's nice to have a break. But what I am doing going forward, since I often have a guest now on the show, I am putting in the comments section of the video on YouTube the segment timing. So, if you just want to listen to the forecast or whatever the astrological information is that I'm sharing on the podcast, you can skip to that. Or if you just want to, first listen to the guest and then listen to the forecast later, you can do that as well. All you have to do is click on the numbers in the comments section, and it will actually take you right to that position in the video where the portion that you want to listen to begins. So I hope that helps. Now, today is no exception with regard to special guests. I am so incredibly honored and delighted to introduce my guest today. Souvik Dutta is my guest, and he was first initiated into the spiritual life at the age of 8 by his guru in India. Since then, he has learned Jyotish from 3 distinct lineages, from the Tantric, Vedic, and Nadi traditions. Souvik is also the founder of the online Vedic Astrology School, AIAC, which stands for Ancient Indian Astrology Classes, where he teaches students across the world and conducts seminars and client consultations. Along with his Facebook page, AIAC, he also publishes the AIAC Times, which can be found on Scribd. And Souvik also has been tutoring a small group of senior scholars, which I was so fortunate to be a part of for over 5 years, having studied with various teachers and also, read my share of Jyotish books as well as Western astrology books too, because that's where I started in the late 90s, is Western astrology for many of you who don't know. But I have to say that my studies with Souvik has had the most significant impact on my understanding and practice of Jyotish since I began studying Jyotish in 2001, and I am forever grateful for his teachings. So once again, incredibly honored to host Souvik Dutta on Karmic Patterns podcast today. Here's our conversation. Thanks again for joining me today, Souvik, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Pamela, for having me over.
Oh, honestly, it's my honor, and especially after having spent so many years as a student with you. I am truly delighted to have you as my teacher here on this show today. And if you'd like, I think one of the topics that is always important, I think, to dive more deeply into are timing techniques. And in Jyotish, right, there's, I think, 8 million, not to exaggerate, 8 million different, right, timing techniques that you can use. But the most widely used today, particularly, I think, in the West, would be the Vimshottari dasha system.
Right. So that's correct. And there are a couple of reasons for that. So based on the school of thought or the school of Jyotish that one adheres to, they can use either Vimshottari or Ashtottari, or even sometimes just use Rashi Dashas. But it's true that widely, because of primarily the reason that you use or assign rulership to all the 9 grahas in the Vimshottari dasha system, probably because of that, or just because it's just been popular by the verse of Parashara, which says that, in Kali Yuga, this is one of the most relevant dashas which is going to work. It just became very popular, and that's what it is. But it's very interesting because Vimshottari dasha, and please feel free to interrupt me if you want to ask me any question on what I say, but I could just keep going, right?
Keep going. I love it.
But one of the most important things about Vimshottari dasha, its basis is nakshatras. And I don't have to tell you this, but pretty much it's a wave in the Jyotish world right now. It's the in thing to talk about nakshatras. Everyone is talking about nakshatras, and that's very important. But one of the most important things that we often, I just want to bring this up because it's very important to understand Vimshottari, from a perspective of nakshatras, as well as understand the fact that nakshatras is not limited to Vimshottari. So one of the things we have to remember is this thing that we assign planetary lordship to nakshatras is only relevant to Vimshottari dasha. When we are using Vimshottari dasha, we assign graha lordships to nakshatras to classify them into 9 categories. That's because we're using Vimshottari. This system, this classification will not work for Ashtottari dasha. So it's something. But however, understanding nakshatras just by themselves is beyond Vimshottari. You can do a complete reading without using Vimshottari dasha, but just using nakshatras, and at that point, it will be incorrect to say. I'll just give you a random example that Shatabhishak nakshatra is ruled by Rahu. No, that's wrong. Shatabhishak nakshatra, if you have to say who it is ruled by or who's the lord of Shatabhishak, it's Varuna. Shatabhishak is given the lordship to a Graha Rahu when we are talking about Vimshottari and Vimshottari alone. Now, I know we did Vimshottari, and I repeated this just for the sake of the wider audience. I'm just mentioning this because it's important to understand this concept. And the other thing about Vimshottari is understanding the fact that the nakshatras are clubbed into groups of 3. Now, why do we do that? We do that primarily because we want to give Vimshottari that 120 years unifiedly distributed to all the 9 grahas. And so we group nakshatras. That's the reason that we group nakshatras. The timing allocated to each Mahadasha, it's, to be very honest with you, till today, till today, there is not a clear answer. There has been theories, multitude of theories. Hindu Dasha System was a book written by English. I don't remember the name of the author top of my head. There has been theories proposed by Raman. There has been theories proposed by an astrologer called Krishnaji. There has been theories proposed by so many astrologers, Pandit Sanjay Rath. So many astrologers have come up with a probable reason why the uneven distribution of the tenure in these 120 years has been ascribed to certain grahas. Some even have come across or mentioned the fact that the nakshatras are not uniform in the actual celestial sky, and so the ununiformity of the nakshatras is taken into account. Speed of the moon in nakshatras is taken into account. A lot of theories have been proposed, but nothing that, very honestly, very candidly speaking, nothing that is put out there is uh, unanimously accepted. So that part is still open to interpretation. Why the ununiform distribution of Vimshottari Mahadasha to various Graha lots. However, what's really important to understand is that the birth nakshatra becomes very important. The birth nakshatra, as in whenever in Jyotish we say Janma nakshatra, we are talking about the nakshatra of the moon. And the moment the nakshatra of the moon is, whenever we talk about in Vimshottari, the nakshatra of the moon, immediately we talk about triangles. And this is a part I know you love this part because you are into sacred geometry. And this is the part which is fascinating, that the nakshatras are activated in triangles. So, for example, if someone is born in Purva Falguni Nakshatra, then instantly that moment in the chart, the other nakshatras which are triangular to it. So we are talking about, let's see, Purvashad, and we are also talking about Purva Falguni, and then what's the other one? Then we are also talking about Bharani.
Yeah.
So Bharani, Purva Falguni, and Purvashad instantly gets activated a moment a person is born at the time when moon is in any of these three nakshatras. So the nakshatras activate in triangles. And it's very important to understand why. Because triangular, the trikon relationship, is the first natural relationship that exists in nature. The triangle. And you are into sacred geometry, you would understand. It's the symbol of creation. Why? There are multiple explanations. Let me just give you the most simplest one. This human birth. From the time a lady gives birth to a child till the time the lady and just after birth, in the next cycle the lady can conceive again. Until the time the lady can give birth again, biologically speaking, it's 9 solar months. And then from that point onwards, again the same process is repeated. The child is born in 9 solar months. So if you continue this cycle, you get a triangle. Triangle is the form of Agni, form of birth, form of creation. And so this triangle is at every point in the cosmos is radiating in 2 different other points. And so this is the essence of Vimshottari. That's how when we look at my Shukra Mahadasha is running, when your Shukra Mahadasha is running, what's really going on is Bharani, Purva Falguni, and Purvashad in the cosmos is activated. Now, here's the part that's very, very interesting with Vimshottari. Since these 3 nakshatras are activated for a wide range of time, like for example, Shukra Mahadasha, right? So we are talking about 20 years. Mm-hmm. So in these 20 years, when these nakshatras are activated in your birth chart, That means whatever in transit, in Gochar, is happening in these three nakshatras are directly affecting your life much more intensely than everything else going on. Everything else is also impacting you, your transits on your lagna, transits on moon, this and that. But if you're looking at it from a perspective of Vimshottari Mahadasha, then these three nakshatras, everything that's going on in these three nakshatras, Saturn passing over, huge, huge. Whenever Mars transit is happening, which is more frequent, intense. So you and Rahu Ketu moving into these nakshatras, very important to understand in the Gochar how the transits and influence of these nakshatras are impacting you. Of course, taking the birth chart into consideration. So if you have other grahas in these nakshatras in your birth chart, then again put a layer of interpretation on that.
Okay. And so you're saying that specifically these planetary lords, or I almost like to call them activators, right? Because the Lord is the deity of the nakshatra. Is that correct?
See, the Lord, the deed. So here's the thing. Let's talk. What is a nakshatra, right? Nakshatra is a celestial space, but that celestial space has stars in them. Tara. Now, what is a star? Star. So do we worship Surya? Our Surya, right? Surya Devata. We have mantras for Surya. We have Gayatri mantra. We have Aditya Rudayam, and all these given by Agastya Maharishi. So we have all these mantras to worship Surya. Aditya is a deity, is a god, just not a graha. He's God. He's Shakshat Ishvara. That's so. If someone goes and reads the Puranas, the Agni Purana, for example, just hitting me on the top of my head, then and Surya is given the status of Ishvara, God. All the deities reside in Surya. So similarly, these nakshatras hold stars, which are gods. So here's the beautiful thing, right? Just see this comparison. Very interesting comparison. The Rashis, the zodiac signs, the symbols of the zodiac signs. Do you think the symbols of the zodiac signs are earthly or are they divine? Are they things that we can touch, feel, experience, or are they godly? What's your take on it? The symbols of the zodiac signs, the animals or the scales.
I feel like that's just something I've never thought about. I'm gonna just take a wild guess and say earthly, even though they're celestial. They're celestial.
They are
symbols,
celestial,
right?
Absolutely, they are celestial symbols, but the symbols are on earth. Think about it. I mean, what a ram is there's a ram that they have put on the sky, but the ram you can see, you go like, for example, Colorado, you'll see rams in Colorado. You'll probably, in any hilly area, you will see rams, mountain goats.
Right.
It's something that you can just go out and experience and see. A crab, Florida, California, you'll find crabs. You go to any, safari, you'll see a lion. These are all earthly things. But look at the deities of the nakshatras. Bharani, Yama. Do you just step out of your home and say hi to Yama? We can't.
No, hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Kritika, Agni, right. Then Rohini, Prajapati, right? And then all the so nakshatra deities are divine; they are gods. Mm-hmm. But the zodiac signs are earthly symbols. So when we are giving, now the grahas are in between. So you have the bhuloka, then you have the bhuvaloka, and then you have the swargaloka, right? Bhuloka is earth. Mm-hmm. Bhuvaloka is where the grahas are residing, sun being the lord of them, right? The grahas are residing in bhuvaloka. And then you have swargaloka, where the nakshatras are. So the nakshatras are divine, but they are being viewed through the lens of Bhuvaloka, because we directly just can't go to Swargaloka. There's a layer in between. So when the classification of Vimshottari Dasha comes up, they are classifying the heavenly nakshatras into groups and assigning it to her graha to understand the calculation perspective of it. But that doesn't mean that the Lord of Bharani is Shukra. No. The Lord of Bharani is Yama, and that doesn't mean that the Lord of Purva Falguni is Shukra either. So the Lord of Purva Falguni, depending on which text you are going to, some say Aryaman, some say Bhaga, but for most practical purposes, I have seen as Bhaga. So Bhaga is the Lord of Purva Falguni, but the Graha representing Purva Falguni in Vimshottari Dasha is Shukra. So there's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So that's yeah.
Oh, sorry. That's
a
great explanation. Thank you. Because I think there is a lot of different schools of thought out there around, the amount of influence that the Graha participates in with regard to the nakshatra, correct? Like
absolutely.
Put a lot of weight on Venus as the planet that activates that nakshatra through the Vimshottari dasha system, and put a lot of weight into what it means, etc., rather than or as much weight maybe as the Lord, right, would the deity that is associated with it. And do you have a thought on that?
It's a very, very good question, and it's very interesting that you mention it, because just few days ago we were talking about this exact concept of filters. So I'll give you an example. So before that, let me give you a mantra for Ketu. It's a very interesting mantra. Ketu mantra is very interesting because it kind of gives you a lot of clue about what we're talking about. So this is given by Vyasa. So the mantra for Ketu is Palasha Pushpa Shankasham Taraka Graha Mastakam Raudratmakam Ghoram Tam Ketu Pranamamyaham. The word here that I want to bring up, Taraka Graha Mastakam. So one of the names of Ketu is one that causes pain to the taras or nakshatras. One of the names of Ketu is one that causes destruction of a nakshatra. So I'll give you an example. One of the classic remedies is that if a graha is in a nakshatra, okay, nakshatras are divine beings. They are gods. And their blessings are constantly coming to us on earth. But the problem is there is a whole layer of filter in the Bhuvaloka of grahas which the blessings has to filter through. So if there is a graha in a nakshatra, in a chart, then to get the blessings of that nakshatra, the graha form has to be appeased. So in other words, according to Vimshottari Dasha, if Shukra rules Bharani, Purvashar, and Purva Falguni, then, and it's placed anywhere in the chart, then that, I understand from perspective that you say from the school of thought, that if Shukra activates, then there is a relation between these three nakshatras activating. This will work, it's true, but only when that activation is in the context of Vimshottari Dasha. Mm-hmm. That means if I am looking at Vimshottari Dasha and I'm looking at Dasha, Antardasha, Pratyantar Dasha, and so on, if I'm going to fine tune, but if I'm using the context of Vimshottari Dasha, that Shukra absolutely can activate the three nakshatras. But if there are many astrologers who do not use Vimshottari Dasha, They do not. They don't have to because they have other tools, right? And I don't want to, talk about those tools now because we were talking about Vimshottari, so let's stick to that topic. But there are multitude of tools, and we have spoken that I use Vimshottari only as a, second level of checking. I do not primarily use Vimshottari as the first timing tool, but it's important to know it. But the thing is, if you go out of Vimshottari and you're looking at grahas and nakshatras, we'll always have to remember that the grahas. So, since you brought it up, and I don't know how we are doing on time, but I will give you one simple story and a scientific explanation behind that, which is going to make this concept of Graha-nakshatra relationship very clear. Can I go ahead and do that?
Please.
Okay. You must have heard about a story where the favorite wife of Moon, Chandra, was Rohini.
Yes.
Correct? We've all heard about the story. And because the moon favored Rohini so much, that moon ignored the other 26 wives who were all daughters of Daksha. Correct? We know that. Is that just a Puranic mythological tale, or is there a truth to it? Truth as in real, observable, verifiable, scientific truth. Now, Rohini, as a space in the sky, is wider, but there is one important star in Rohini, which is the brightest. And the English name of that star in Rohini is called Aldebaran. Okay? It is called the bullseye. Very bright. Very, very bright. Aldebaran is the only star in the whole of ecliptic in the history of mankind that can be occulted by the moon. Now, what is occultation? You can Google this. Okay, I'm not making this story up. Occultation is apparent to Earth. Certain planets cover up the sight of certain stars, like an eclipse. Like an eclipse. When we cannot see the sun and moon because of a shadow, right? Similarly, we cannot see a nakshatra because a graha comes in front of us in our line of sight. The only graha, the only heavenly body that this phenomena is called occultation of a star. The only heavenly body in the whole of time period of this planet that can occult Aldebaran is the moon. It's fascinating.
Wow.
It's science. So they observed it. Ancients observed it. So what does it mean? That when moon goes and obstructs our vision of Rohini, it's almost like moon to us. Of course, the distance from us to moon and us to Rohini is absolutely incomparable. But you have to understand that all of these legends were developed based on what we saw. There is nothing called absolute truth, right? What is apparent to us, what is how we visualize it. So when they saw that moon was coming right here in front of us and occulting Rohini, it's like making love to Rohini. So this is how so what happens when a graha comes and basically comes in front of a nakshatra, the energy of the nakshatra flows through the graha. That is the beauty of the Graha-nakshatra relationship. It's like a filter from Swargaloka to Bhuvaloka and to the Bhuloka. It's a filter. So moon acts like a filter to get the energy of Rohini. And so you basically, and especially you have to look very carefully in the nakshatra in which Ketu is placed. Why? The nakshatra where Ketu is placed, that nakshatra gets confused. You know what Ketu is, right? A headless kind
Right.
of a guy.
Very detached.
Very detached. So that nakshatra becomes very, very, the energy of that nakshatra becomes very hazy because it goes through a headless Ketu. The nakshatra where moon is placed, just like moon in Rohini, is the energy of the nakshatra flows through the mind. The nakshatra in which Surya is placed is very important. Most people don't know about this. The nakshatra where Surya is placed becomes blind. That means you cannot completely feel the energy of that nakshatra. It gets imbibed into Surya. Why? In the daytime, can you see stars? We can't.
No.
Because there's too much light. Mm-hmm. So the nakshatra in which Surya, the Surya nakshatra, the nakshatra, which is basically the nakshatra eclipsed by the sun, let's put it that way, right, is the nakshatra which becomes blind. That means you cannot get the full energy of that nakshatra. It kind of gets into, it's like the nearest layman explanation is like a combustion of a planet, right? Combust planet. So it's like and it's not, you don't call it a combust nakshatra, but you call it the nakshatra becomes blind. Right. So let's come to the very, very, very fundamental concept of time of birth. What is the reason why astrologers ask for time of birth? What is the basic reason for asking the time of birth? Ascendant. Ascendant. Because in a day, typically, of course, there are exceptions, but in a day, typically, moon stays in the same nakshatra. Of course, it changes based on of course, there might be transit times, but typically speaking, stays in the same nakshatra in a one. When I say a day, I mean a Gregorian calendar solar day. Just want to be very clear. A Gregorian calendar solar day, moon typically stays. So if you have a date of birth for a person, that's enough to pinpoint approximately the position of moon. Everything else stays the same. Mm-hmm. The moment we say time of birth, we are trying to determine the ascendant. We are trying to determine the cardinal coordinates of the person. We are trying to determine houses. So the moment we say time, we are talking about lagna. And lagna nakshatra is very important. Extremely important. The lagna nakshatra can be used as a rectification tool because the lagna nakshatra determines the intellectual psyche of the individual. So in cases where the nakshatra is changing in a few minutes, if the astrologer knows the client very well, he or she can ask some question. Forget divisional charts. Don't even need to go there. Don't even need. And of course, I'm talking about those exceptional cases where the Lagna nakshatra is changing in a few minutes, like in a couple of minutes. You can just get to know the client a little better to figure out which nakshatra is the Lagna nakshatra. Because that divine form is going to flow into the intellectual capabilities of the individual. So yeah, I know. I told you that I have a difficulty stopping, so I can just carry on. But yeah, it is such a intense, detailed topic. There's so much to it. But Vimshottari dasha, whether anyone agrees or disagrees, the fact is it's the most widely and most successfully used timing tool of Jyotishis around the world. There's no doubt about it.
Wonderful. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners today? Or do you have any workshops coming up, or just anything really that you'd like to address?
Yeah, yes, I do have regular workshops happening in Chicago. I am planning, I do every year go to Houston, Texas, and a couple of other places, but generally, as Pamela, you've known me for years, life is very ad hoc and I take it as it comes. But my Facebook page, Ancient Indian Astrology Classes, will have all my updates of whatever events are happening, my webinars happening. I do hold webinars time to time. And the message is that, truly speaking, the only thing that we need to remember about Jyotish is that we know nothing and we are all learning. It's such an ocean. It's lifetime of learning, of works of 18 seers, 18 masters, which have gone through ages. And the beautiful thing about it, it has survived because there is truth in it. So it's a lifelong learning process. No, it's endless. We stop when we die. That's my message.
Right. And then maybe we don't even stop then. Maybe it just continues.
Yes, and we carry on. True. Very true.
For me, it's going to be many, many, many lifetimes of learning.
For all of us. Thank you so much, Pamela, for having me over. And I wish your viewers all the best. And I want to congratulate you on the amazing work that you are doing on yantras, your Jyotish work, your write-ups. I see your updates. Amazing. I love them. Please keep them flowing, and my best wishes are with you.
Thank you so much. It's all the wisdom of my teachers, yourself included. So I am grateful to be able to continue to spread the light of Jyotish of my guru. So thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.